Welcome to my channel, detailing events throughout the decades. 2001. American Airlines Flight 587. It had been only 2 months since the terrible events of 9/11. It was November 12, 2001 when American Airlines Flight 587 was set to depart from New York's John F. Kennedy International Airport, en route to Las Americanas International Airport in Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic. On board in the cockpit was Captain Ed States, aged 42, and First Officer Sten Mullen, aged 34. Also on board were 7 cabin crew and 251 passengers. The aircraft made its way to runway 31L, where it was to follow a Japan Airlines Boeing 747. Japan Airlines departed, and air traffic control contacted American Airlines Flight 587 to caution them about potential wake turbulence. Wake turbulence is a disturbance in the atmosphere, which forms behind an aircraft as it passes through the air. Just a few minutes later, American Airlines Flight 587 was cleared for takeoff. The aircraft departed and climbed to 500 feet before entering a left turn and climbing to 13,000 feet. Not long after this, American Airlines Flight 587 hit the wake turbulence it had been warned about. The first officer quickly moved the rudder from left to right in quick succession, as he had been trained to do. However, this would have a dire impact on the aircraft. The stress of this type of action resulted in the lugs, which attached the vertical stabilizer and rudder to fail. The stabilizer separated from the aircraft and came crashing into Jamaica Bay. Just 8 seconds later, the stall warning sounded in the cockpit. American Airlines Flight 587 suddenly pitched downwards, and the pilots fought to gain back control of the aircraft as it went into a flat spin, unaware of what had happened. Suddenly both engines sheared off and moments later American Airlines Flight 587 came crashing to the ground. The engines landed several blocks from the main crash site, landing on a gas station, house, and boat. It was just 9:17 a.m. when American Airlines crashed into the intersection of Newport Avenue and 131st Street in the neighborhood of Queens, a borough of New York. People witnessing the crash were in complete shock, and panic set in. It had only been 2 months since the 9/11 attacks, and many believed that this was another terrorist-related incident. News of the crash quickly spread and it wasn't long before the Empire State Building and the United Nations headquarters were evacuated in fear of another 9/11 attack. A makeshift morgue was quickly assembled to place the victims of the crash, and for the victims to be identified. 251 passengers and 9 crew members died in the crash. A dog was also killed in the crash, which was being transported in the cargo hold, along with 5 people and a dog on the ground. At the time, family members awaiting their loved ones' arrival at Las Americas International Airport were unaware the flight had crashed, and were still happily waiting for the flight to arrive. Emergency crews arriving at the scene of the crash were stunned at what they were witnessing. Quickly the NTSB launched an investigation into the crash. Over the next few months they conducted around 349 interviews with witnesses to the crash, and collected and reconstructed the wreckage. People were keen for the investigation to be concluded quickly, awaiting any news that this was an act of terrorism. The NTSB found that the first officer had attempted to stabilize the aircraft with alternating aggressive rudder inputs. The force of the air flowing against the moving rudder stressed the aircraft's vertical stabilizer, and this eventually sheared off entirely, causing the pilots to lose control over the aircraft. There had been no way out of this for the pilots, and the aircraft was now destined to come down. The NTSB concluded that if the first officer had stopped his actions, then the aircraft would have stabilized. The Airbus A300 was found to have a sensitive rudder system design, and these types of actions which the first officer had done, were part of American Airlines training program. The vertical stabilizer was connected to the fuselage with 6 attaching points. Each point has 2 sets of attachment lugs, one made of composite material, and the other of aluminium. These are then connected by a titanium bolt. Damage analysis showed that the bolts and aluminium lugs were still intact, but not the composite material. This concerned the investigators. Tests carried out on the vertical stabilizers from the aircraft and other similar aircraft found that the strength of the composite material had not been compromised, and it was concluded that the material had failed due to the stress caused by aggressive actions, which was beyond its design limit. This meant that this type of failure could happen again if the same type of action is performed by another pilot. It was found that American Airlines incorrectly taught the use of the rudder in wake turbulence recovery, which the first officer had done at the time, thinking this was the correct procedure. Airbus claimed the crash was American Airlines' fault, claiming the airline did not train its pilots properly in the characteristics of the rudder. The NTSB determined that the probable cause of the crash was the in-flight separation of the vertical stabilizer, as a result of loads beyond the design, that were created by the first officer's unnecessary and excessive rudder pedal inputs, and due to the design of the rudder system, as well as American Airlines' aircraft maneuvering program. After the accident, and after the NTSB report, American Airlines modified its pilot training program. A memorial was constructed in Rockaway Park in memory of those killed that morning. It was dedicated on November 12, 2006, on the 5th anniversary of the crash. A ceremony commemorating the crash is held annually at the memorial site each year on November 12. Years later, relatives and friends of those who died say the pain of losing their loved ones in the crash is still fresh in their minds. Forever remembering those who died that morning of November 12, 2001. May your memory live on. Thank you for watching and learning about these events throughout history. Please subscribe to my channel, to view other events throughout the decades.